From the crossroads of the Missouri Ozarks, it's PID Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
Hi, I'm Sharon Gilbert, and here we are once again in our living room. The girls are sleeping in the crate, at least I think they are.
At least they're quiet in the crate, yes.
They've been playing outside all morning, so I think that they have enough energy siphoned off to sleep for a bit.
That is a good thing. You know, it's really wonderful that and I think it was really wise of you to look for a younger dog to go along with Grace. Grace, when we got her a year ago, November, if you've been following us for any length of time, Grace, the rescue dog, came to us after she was found wandering on a farm about 30 miles west of here. And we went out, collected her, and brought her home. She immediately bonded with me. She is definitely daddy's girl.
Definitely your girl.
But the thing about Grace, and it's kind of a mystery because we don't know what happened to these puppies. She had clearly just given birth because she was still lactating. So we don't know where those puppies are to this day. And so anyway, when Sharon started looking for another dog a few months later, and then Glory was turned up on this local Facebook group for lost and found pets. She'd been dumped out of a car on a busy road in North Springfield, right in front of the Super Walmart, in the middle of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And this young couple who'd already had 3 dogs scooped her up out of traffic, but had to find her a new home. So Sharon got in line first, but Glory, who was only 10 weeks old at the time, we think, she has been a wonderful for Grace.
And she's mine.
Yeah, she loves to snug in next to you in the mornings, and she'll do that with me in the evenings. But Grace definitely wants to insert herself between Glory and me. Whenever they're greeting me, it's like, okay, don't pay attention to her, pay attention to me.
But they play together so well.
They do, and that has been a blessing because when we first got Grace, I was able to walk her around our property. And so we'd get a mile and a half of walking every day. But as my mobility issues have increased, I haven't been able to do that. But she gets the exercise now by going out and playing with Glory. So we are blessed. And there are times when we make concessions. Like, for example, rather than going out to our podcast setup in the barn, we're doing this from the living room so that if they need attention, we can give it to them. But
yeah,
that's a small.
It's a bit of a chore for you to go. We've got a few steps in our garage, and you go out the garage door to get to our barn. So when you go out to the barn to do 5 and 10, or you and I go out there to record Unraveling Revelation or Bible's Greatest Mysteries, we do that. We have to do those things in the barn.
Right.
We don't like leaving the dogs in the crate for very long. Glory, if she's left for more than a couple of hours, will get very bored.
Oh, yeah.
And it stops being play and she starts chewing things. Other than that, she doesn't chew things in the house. She doesn't destroy things. So she's actually a really amazingly well-behaved little dog. So anyway, that's why we try to do things in the house whenever possible.
Right. So anyway, that is why we are here on the couches once again. We thank you for joining us. Please, if you haven't done so, download our free app. You can find it at pidradio.com/app or gilberthouse.org/app. Gilberthouse.org is our main web hub where we connect everything. You can also go to our store there that leads you to books and videos. The video now all streaming video, instant access, full HD, no value added tax, no shipping costs, and all of that linked right there at gilberthouse.org/store.
All of that. VAT is like a hidden tariff.
It really is.
It's the consumer who has to pay it.
Yeah, and Donald Trump has pointed out correctly that it makes American things sent to, say, the UK, the European Union, more expensive. And so when he's talking about tariffs and everybody's heads explode, it's because, as with many other things, cutting off funding through USAID to non-government organizations, the heads are exploding because suddenly the American taxpayer is no longer on the hook for funding things in their countries, but also funding things that really, when you start looking at what USAID was spending money on, not benefiting neither the American taxpayer nor the country in which USAID was spending that money.
Not at all. We're going to get to the news in just a minute, but a really quick health update for those of you who have been praying for us. I'll just let you know I've finished all 4 of my treatments for my eyes. I go back on May 2nd
Mhm.
for an 8-week week checkup and to have my eyes refracted so I can have my cataract surgery. So I'm praying that in the next 3 months, my eyes will be back to normal. Thank you for praying for me. You guys are wonderful.
Yes.
Derek had an MRI. Did you want to talk about that, or
Yeah,
I can?
yeah. No, we can talk about that. Just before I flew to Canada, on the recommendation of the naturopath that I visited a couple of weeks ago, and this is somebody who's been treating Joe Horn and has really helped Joe Horn with his health issues, the leaky gut especially, um, based on the symptoms that I described, which are not all just foot drop and
It's a cluster of
they're a
symptoms
cluster
that
of symptoms.
indicated something neurological.
Right, right. The double vision when I get fatigued and so forth. And now I've got new glasses, by the way, with very, very subtle prisms in them
Mm.
that correct for that. I've not had that issue since I've gotten these new glasses, which is really good because when I have to drive, like later today, I've got to go collect the half a steer that we just purchased from our neighbor from the packing house. That's a 2 hours of driving there and back. You don't want that double yellow line to suddenly turn into a quadruple yellow.
No.
Anyway, Dr. Sams recommended the MRI because it became more likely that there was something going on there, and it appears that there is a chronic meningitis
Hmm.
going on, and not spinal, and we don't know what the cause is, viral perhaps, but we don't know. More testing needed. So referred back to my primary care physician for a referral to a neurologist for what they call an
Electromyograph, I think.
electromyograph. Okay. And that will basically trace the conductivity of my nerves, I guess.
Yeah, I've had it done many years
Yeah,
ago. So thank you for praying for us. You guys are wonderful. The Lord is in control, and
yeah,
we're absolutely comfortable with that.
yes.
Yeah. So
So
news-wise,
can
boy,
still think and
howdy.
talk, and that's been basically my life anyway. As an adult, my only marketable skills:
Uh,
talking, thinking, using a computer.
you
There we go.
mentioned you mentioned tariffs. We both did just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Well, as of this morning, China has announced a 100% tariff on anything coming in from Canada.
Well, China has announced that.
I shared it on the X space this
Wow.
morning.
Now,
China.
okay. So now, why is China going after Canada?
Well, isn't that a good question?
Huh.
Let me see if I can find.
And I know that there are globalists who are just flipping out that Donald Trump is triggering a trade war.
Um, just in, this was 13 hours ago, China imposes 100% tariffs on select Canadian imports. Um, Another share on X. What are the retaliation tariffs? Where are the speeches from Ford and Smith? What Chinese goods are banned? Oh, nothing? Is it because China actually does run Canada already?
Well,
And
huh,
speaking of China, Missouri's AG has gone after a number of issues that he feels have harmed Missouri citizens.
that's right.
One of those is China buying up land, and he has demanded that China pay up.
Hmm.
He's won a case against them. He also won a case against, I think, some of the lockdowns during the whole 2020-21
Yeah, during the pandemic.
experiment.
Yeah, so our Attorney General Andrew Bailey has really been going after a number
Mhm.
of things. Went after the Biden administration for a number of issues, but yeah, apparently has won a $25 billion judgment against the government of government of China.
And he's
Now,
telling them to pay up.
now whether the CCP will pay up is another question. But that
Oh,
is,
I doubt that they will.
yeah, very very
I think they
interesting.
have to relinquish control of anything that they supposedly
Well,
bought.
well, that's it. I think that's what the Attorney General here in Missouri is going to do if the government of China doesn't pay up, to just start seizing property,
Hmm.
Missouri farmland that the
Yes.
Chinese government has purchased. China has been on a buying spree of American land, but very interestingly and not coincidentally, that land is often in close proximity to our military
I
bases.
know. And military bases are often in the middle of nowhere
Yep.
for security reasons, but in the middle of nowhere often means they're surrounded by farmland.
Yeah. Um, This was a story that actually was reported,
A couple of
gosh,
years ago.
yeah, going back to 2021. I remember talking about this. Um, so this is not even a Republican or a Republican. Attorney General Andrew Bailey here is a Republican, but yeah, Politico reported in July of 2021 that the House of Representatives were advancing legislation to crack down on foreign purchases of agricultural real estate. And again, a lot of this was not just Chinese control of our food supply, but again, access to land that puts them close enough to our military bases to observe things we might not want foreign agents observing. So, yeah, it's America first, which is kind of what you hope your government would be doing all along.
That's what every world leader should be doing, putting that country first,
Right.
his people or her people first.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's not what's going on in many countries. You take a look at the European Union and also the UK,
Hmm.
and those leaders, for the most part, are not putting their people first. They're putting the illegal immigrants first.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a story this morning of a man climbing Big Ben in London with a Palestinian flag.
Yeah.
My comment on that was, okay, this picture says it all. London has fallen.
Well, yeah. We saw this back in 2019 when we went to the UK and visited sites that you write about in your series, the Red Wing Saga, and went to the East End
Mm-hmm.
so that
To
we
the
could the
Whitechapel
Whitechapel
area.
area, yeah, so we could visit the sites that were prominent there, the location of H Division, where the investigators in the Jack the Ripper murders were based. And going down one of those main streets there, as we walked along, seeing all the open air market there with all of these women wearing their hijabs and like, and
The signs on the lampposts
signs on
were
the
so
lamppost.
weird.
Yeah, it was apparently for some Muslim charity, but the guy whose face was on that sign looked like a dead ringer for Osama bin Laden.
Mm-hmm.
And these were hanging like every second street light post along this street in London. That was about the time I remember John Cleese, known from Monty Python and other things, Faulty Towers,
Mm-hmm.
greatest sitcom in history. Um, Cleese made the comment that London isn't English anymore, and he was pilloried. He was vilified by the press. How dare you say that?
Sadiq Khan essentially said the same thing a
Then he
couple of
turned around
years
and
ago.
said it
He
right.
said that white Britons do not represent London.
Yeah, yeah. I think the English, in other words, the Anglo-Saxons who founded the country. I mean, England is Angle land. That's where it gets the name. Are finding themselves soon to be a minority in their own country, especially if Sir Keir Starmer continues to allow the boats in. But this isn't a labor thing either, because the Conservatives under Rishi Sunak were stopping the boats. Under Boris Johnson, we're stopping the boats. Well, they weren't stopping the boats. They were welcoming them in and they were putting them up and giving them hotel space. As here in the United States, illegal migrants have crossed the southern border. Um, New York City is trying to get back, I think it was $84 million that the Department of Homeland Security clawed back from New York City, saying, we are not paying for you, New York City, to host illegal migrants in the Roosevelt Hotel or whatever.
Well, and you also have many of these illegals, first of all, in the European countries and parts of our United States that are being put first in line for services.
Social
They
services, right?
live on the government handout. Many of them do not work. They simply consume.
Mhm.
They get allowances.
Yeah.
All of their facilities, their food, all of that is paid for. Many of the women and there aren't that many women, but those women that do come through are often having lots and lots of babies that, in England at least, they are on the NHS dime. They get every service provided for free, and the women do not work. Sometimes the men will work, but oftentimes you also see these people groups, and it isn't just Mediterranean, sorry, it isn't just Middle Eastern.
Hmm.
The Ukrainians who have come to the United States and parts of England and elsewhere, who sheltered after the beginning of the war, are protesting. They are protesting in the countries that are embracing them, protesting against those countries. Example, in New York City, the Ukrainians that are being sheltered there are protesting against Donald Trump because he won't continue supporting Zelensky.
Well, you can understand their sentiment there, I guess. But on the other hand, when you're being put up in a host country that is paying for you.
And many of them were young men,
Uh,
able-bodied young men.
Who fled the country rather than being conscripted.
Who, if the war's gone on long enough, they may have gotten over here as a 15-year-old, and now they're 18.
They don't conscript until age 25 in Ukraine. This is something that the United States has been pushing Ukraine to lower the age of conscription to 18, but the Ukrainians don't want to do it because they know that if they don't have young men who can marry young women, they don't have any future generations coming.
Well,
and sadly, that's
point.
the reality of the meat grinder that is the war with Russia right now.
Well,
I do want to talk a little bit more about that war in Ukraine if we want to.
We're happy to do that.
Okay. Because yes, the globalists are wanting to erase national borders, and I think this is more the overarching plan of these policies that make no sense whatsoever.
Well, since PID radio stands for Peering into Darkness, looking at the spiritual side, the theopolitics behind all of it, first of all, talk about the geopolitics, and then let's discuss the theopolitics.
Right. What could be causing all of this? President Trump has paused intelligence sharing with Ukraine. And when you read or hear those words in the English language, you assume that means intelligence gathered by the Defense Intelligence Agency or the CIA or something to assist Ukraine in forming its battle plans, its order of battle for the units on the battlefield. What was telling was that this was revealed, well, first by a couple of sources to Financial Times, but then the CIA director, Trump's new CIA director, John Ratcliffe, talked about this with Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business earlier this week. And this is significant because the CIA, the National Geospatial Office, the ones that basically look down from the satellites and
eyes in the sky,
the NSA, they and the United States military, they hold the encryption keys to the targeting systems used by the long-range missiles that the U.S. has shared with Ukraine, the HIMARS and most recently the ATACMS, ATACMS, the clever acronym, the ATACMS, which have been used to launch missile strikes deep inside Russia. UK intelligence, likewise, holds the keys to the targeting systems for its Storm Shadow missiles.
I have a question for you before you continue this explanation. The eyes in the sky, do all the Five Eyes nations share data amongst themselves?
Yeah.
That includes Australia.
Australia and New Zealand and Canada.
Right.
Yeah. As well as the US and UK. So this pause in what's being shared is not just intelligence, hey, our spies hear that the Russians are planning to attack over here. No, it's literally the targeting solutions. Okay, you want to target this building in this city 1,000 kilometers from the border with Ukraine? Okay, tell us what you want to hit and we'll punch in the numbers. And because we're not giving the Ukrainians the keys to those systems. What that means is the United States, the US and the UK, Special Forces, Intelligence, GCHQ, MI6, CIA, whatever, they are directly, which means the United States, United Kingdom, directly firing these missiles into Russia. Russia has said for a couple of years now that this is already an open war between Russia and NATO. NATO is already directly involved. What Trump is doing by pausing the sharing of this information, and the reason they're putting it this way, instead of saying we're not going to shoot any more missiles or drones at Russia, it's because it would have to, then they'd have to admit
And they have been.
That they have been. And the public would be like, are you insane? We do not want World War III with a nuclear-armed Russia. But what they're doing by putting this out publicly and having the CIA director do it, it's like, we're not doing this anymore. Mr. Putin, just so you know, we've stopped this. President Trump has put a stop to this. He's trying to show good faith intent to Putin to bring Putin to the negotiating table. Now, Putin is still saying, no, I don't think so. We'll keep on continuing. And they're continuing to pound Ukrainian positions in the Donbass. And that Kursk in the north, that area in the north near the city of Kursk, where Ukraine made some gains, sort of like their version of the Battle of the Bulge. The Russians are pushing them back there as well.
Well, speaking of the north of Ukraine, let us not forget that Belarus sides with Russia.
Yeah.
And they're just north of Ukraine.
Yeah.
In fact, the head of Belarus offered to negotiate the peace treaty.
He did. Alexander Lukashenko.
When I saw that.
Yeah. Lukashenko was interviewed the other day, by the way, and said that he informed Yevgeny Prigozhin of the Wagner Group. Remember when Wagner rebelled and they were sending forces north to Russia?
Isn't he supposed to be dead?
He is dead. Well, officially he's dead.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be. Officially, he's dead. Prigozhin, and then Wagner said, okay, we made our point, we turned around. Lukashenko said it was because he threatened to send in Belarusian special forces to defend Moscow. Like, I think Lukashenko's trying to inflate his role in the whole thing. Yeah. But anyway, what Trump is trying to do here is basically he's trying to get the United States out of what is already a proxy war, and what the Russians have been saying publicly. We know it's a proxy war. We know you're already shooting at us. Here's the thing, though. If there is a missile that is launched, because we're still sharing this information with GCHQ, with the Brits, it means that somebody in the CIA or MI6 or United Kingdom has decided to go ahead and go against what Trump has declared, has ordered. You know, he's the commander-in-chief of the military. So we're not sharing this information anymore with Ukraine. Okay, because we're part of Five Eyes, we'll share it with the UK, who's over there. But if they go ahead and do it, then suddenly there's going to be a massive, I think, reconfiguration of the United States relationship with NATO and with the UK.
Well, a story came out yesterday that goes along with Trump's anger that Putin has continued and not paused the way he originally said he would. Now, I realize that Zelensky was saying to Trump at the time in that the famous, I should say, meeting, that, by the way, there are so many wonderful versions of that that have been done with AI. But during that, Zelensky said, well, what if he doesn't, hold to the ceasefire? How are you going to help us? Trump has said, as of yesterday, he will, if this continues, pull 30,000 troops, U.S. troops, out of Germany and move them to Poland, which means that they're just a step away from going into Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, that would be certainly a step closer to what we are hoping does not happen, praying does not happen.
As you said, the fact is, for I think all of these 3 years, but especially in the last year, NATO has not been a proxy war at war via proxy. NATO is at war with Russia, not just proxy. They're actually in Ukraine.
Yeah, and this comes back to what we just said a couple of minutes ago, that there must be something spiritual going on here, because there is no logic behind this war.
None.
And the journalist Matt Taibbi, who is not a conservative, he is a liberal, but he's an honest journalist who looks at facts and tries to report them as he sees them, not according to any specific red team, blue team, allegiance. He posted to his Substack account the timeline of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, this whole conflict. So when the media tells us that this all stems from the invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, completely unprovoked, the journalists who are making those claims are ignoring more than 30 years of history that led up to 2022. When you go back to 1990 and the dissolution, the breakup of the Soviet Union, promises that were made by the United States, this would have been under George H.W. Bush, to protect Ukraine, which convinced Ukraine then to give up the nuclear weapons that were in Ukraine, send them back to Russia. Although there are reports that 80 of them may have gone missing and we don't know where they are anymore. Well, anyway, set that aside. U.S. promised to defend Ukraine, but at the same time, U.S. promised Russia under George H.W. Bush and under Bill Clinton that NATO would not expand one step further east. East Germany is going to reunite with West Germany, and Germany's in NATO, so then East Germany, okay. But other than East Germany, there will not be any expansion eastward, except for Poland and then Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and
under George W.
Right.
George W. Bush.
Right.
He was continuing to expand.
And when the Russians said, "Hey, you guys promised you were," said, "Well, you should have got it in writing." Like so, the Russians at this point believe that the United States deep state is not, how they put it, agreement capable. In other words, white man speak with forked tongue, as the Native Americans found out the hard way over the last 200 years. We make a deal and then we decide it's no longer convenient for us to keep the deal. And so
even if it had been in writing.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have mattered. So the Russians are upset about that because they see it as, in the way we would view, say, the Cuban missiles, the missiles that Russia wanted to put in Cuba back in 1962. Or was it was 62 or 63?
62.
62, right.
October
62, that's
62.
correct. So there was that.
You were 10 months old.
I was, yeah.
So you remember it well.
Yeah. It would be like Mexico signing a mutual defense pact with China. We would not take it well. So, I mean, heck, we went to war with Mexico back in, 1846 over the state of Texas. So you can understand why these things led to where they got to where they are. You go back to 2004 or 5, I forget when the Orange Revolution was in the U.S., kicking out a pro-Russian Ukrainian president. And then in 2014, the Maidan Revolution, again stirred up by the United States to kick out a pro-Russian.
I don't know that I would say stirred up by the United States. I would say stirred up by Soros and his compliant cabal.
Yeah, but
that includes a lot of the swamp.
Right. You had Victoria Nuland over there.
No, that's my point. Don't say the United States, because that means all of us.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Stirred up by the swamp.
Sure.
And the globalists.
Right. Most Americans, look, we would just as soon leave Ukraine alone. Yes, we sympathize with Ukrainians, but it's not our fight. It's not our business. It's not the United States. You look at the budget of the United States and what Trump is trying to do. In fact, this is one of the promises he made. And we could talk more about his address to Congress in the second half. But one of the promises he made was a balanced federal budget by 2028. Like, okay, that would be like putting men on the moon. Hope he does it. But it would mean changing a lot of what we spend our money on.
Elon Musk is finding a lot of waste in federal government. One example is there are X number of employees who would have a right to carry a credit card.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Well, it looks like each of those employees has 10 or 12 credit cards.
Yeah, I know. That was really funny.
Well, they were forced to turn them in, and then a judge said, you can't do that. You have to turn those back out. So Trump returned the cards, the extra cards, but they had a zero balance.
Yeah, $1 spending limit.
$1 spending limit. That was it.
Yeah. So, yeah, pretty hilarious. Also ordered an end to non-essential travel along with the changes. I got an email from somebody who is a retired government employee and said that he was often in areas on government business that were not very nice. I mean, overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it had happened to him more than once where he was trying to find a hotel room in again, a not very nice he didn't get specific, part of the world, and that his credit card was declined because it had exceeded his spending limit, which was not, he said that's really kind of an ugly feeling when you're realizing you're going to have to sleep on the street in, Grozny or someplace like that. I don't know. But he had reached out to a friend who is not yet retired and found that people who are considered mission critical did not have their cards reduced to the $1 limit. So, yeah, these may just be the extraneous cards because, there's like, 2 million government workers and there are like 4 million government credit cards floating around out there.
But do the cards have their pronouns on them?
I don't know. Things that make you go, Well, much more as we try to look at the theopolitics. What's going on in the spirit realm that is pushing the world towards the brink of the cliff?
And we will also talk about the Pope.
That's ahead on PID Radio.
In the days of old, giants walked the earth. Scripture tells how David defeated Goliath, how angels served the Creator, and how the serpent deceived God's image bearers. The prophecies foretold of a coming Savior, one that would reach across the veil and set the captives free. Featuring L.A. Mazzulli.
It's a suicide mission by the fallen angels.
Derek Gilbert.
UFO true believers, the ancient aliens prophets.
And Micah Van Huss.
So in the story of the giant of Kandahar.
At the Mysteries of the Bible Verse event in Carmel, Indiana.
Welcome back to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we want to quickly remind you when you go to gilberthouse.org, please go to gilberthouse.org/app, as Derek said earlier. Download our free app. Also, go to /travel, and you will see all of the information there, linking to Lipkin tours and our planned tours to go to Israel and extensions to Jordan. Yes, indeed, those are open. We can go once again, just like in the old days. So if you want to go with us this October, you can sign up for that tour. We are only going to take one bus, so the number of spots are limited. Also, next spring, we're going to be doing the Iron and Myth tour. So go to that, gilberthouse.org/travel, but also /store, and you can see all of our affiliates. One of those is Light Hive Creations.
Oh, yes.
Kenny C. and his fiance, Gidget Manning, make wonderful products for us and many other ministries. And you can buy T-shirts and caps and mugs and all sorts of goodies. And you support young people who want to study music but can't afford to buy the instruments. Kenny and Gidget make sure they get them.
Yeah, that's what they use the proceeds for, and we are happy to contribute to that. The gift of music, both of us love music. Sharon was a professional vocalist for many years. I was a vocal hobbyist for many years, singing with the Barbershop Harmony Society, but love music, and the voice or the instruments lifted up to honor and praise our King.
Amen.
Is a true gift. Kenny is a world-class musician. So gilberthouse.org/store. Click on the link there. You see the smiling face of Kenny C. modeling a GHTV shirt, but you can also get PID Radio, shirts, caps, mugs, sweatshirts, and the Armored Sheep, Sharon's new podcast.
Also, while you're at gilberthouse.org, our calendar, which you can also access on our app, will tell you where we're going to be, all of the conferences, and also the information about our tours to Israel. So calendar is a great, it even tells you where we're going to, what we're going to study in Gilbert House Fellowship.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Lynn Shepard reminded me, remember to update the upcoming list of studies. So Lynn, I got that done this week. So now
it's the two of us. If we could just get the dogs to do those things.
That's it. Or our daughter. Nicole, come here, run our social media. You'll find all that in the app, but also at gilberthouse.org.
So Theopolitics.
Yep, Theopolitics. And boy, when you're talking about a denomination that claims 1.4 billion adherents out of 2.3 billion Christians on planet Earth. We're talking about the Roman Catholic Church. Anything that affects the church is going to affect a big chunk of what used to be called Christendom. I think that's a word that should still be used. Pope Francis is now going on a month in hospital.
I really don't know what's going on I'm not sure that he's going to get out of that hospital. Whether or not the information we're getting from the Vatican News Service is accurate, I don't know. I have my suspicions, and I know many of you do as well. But I share it on X every morning what their press release says. And as of this morning, once again, he rested comfortably overnight and didn't have any more of those respiratory incidents, which what they're saying was code for he stopped breathing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. The fact is that he's been ill for a while. He's older, so the likelihood of a new conclave to elect a new pope will be happening this year. Think so? Think this year?
I think so.
And
he's 88 years old.
Yeah, it's interesting because 2025, prophetically speaking, has been talked about by many of our friends in ministry, including the late Dr. Tom Horn, a lot over the last 10 years. 2025, a lot of prophecies seem to point to it, and things that we see in the news seem to also point to it. So I, this morning, decided to take a look at the history of the Vatican itself and St. Peter's Basilica. And if you look at that site and the older basilica and the site of the theoretical site, the claimed site of Peter's tomb, don't think he was ever buried in Rome, but this is what the history books claim. That was actually in a cemetery on top of Mons Vaticanus, the mountain of Vatican. Vaticanus might be based, many etymologists believe that it was based on the name of a deity who may have been the deity of human language. In other words, the word. But more than that, there was a temple to the Magna Mater, the Great Mother, on that mount, also known as Cybele, or Queen of Heaven.
Queen of Heaven.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That St. Peter's Basilica, his tomb, was on a location where a temple had been once stood to the Queen of Heaven.
That is very curious. Vaticanus, the deity, or Vagacanus, believed to be a relatively minor deity, but the deity of an infant's first cry, so the creation of human speech.
Right. Which is one thing that, we stand out, human beings, because it was as the imager of God, we not only are the regent of earth, the holder of the dominion of earth, but we also have speech. Now, I realize a lot of animals also, they communicate with one another through various sounds, but the fact that we can speak, that we can write, that language exists is pretty important.
Interesting, the origin of this deity is, I don't know if it's Vagatanus or Vagitanus.
It's J.
Vagitanus.
The I makes it a soft sound.
Okay. Was originally an Etruscan deity.
Yeah, well, a lot of things were originally Etruscan in Rome.
Yeah, exactly. And the Etruscans were, according to some, founded by the survivors of Troy. This was part of the Aeneid, written by the poet Virgil. Aeneas, who's what was the leader of that group of survivors, refugees from the Trojan War, the Mycenaean Greeks, who defeated Troy in that war sometime around 1200 BC. But there are those who base that on etymological grounds. And so there may be some truth to that. And we find that really interesting because Cybele, or Cybele, was a deity from Asia Minor. And her temple in Rome, I think there were two, and the one you're talking about was the secondary temple.
It's a secondary one, yes.
Okay, because the main temple on the Palatine Hill
Right.
was built in the 3rd century BC and incorporated a bit of meteoric rock that was brought to Rome from Asia Minor at the request of an oracle. One of the oracles that were so important in the history of Rome. We need that rock. Okay, bring the space rock. Rocks from heaven, meteoric rock, were considered sacred objects in the ancient world.
Well, it goes back to the battle between Kronos and Uranus.
Yeah,
And when
Uranus.
Kronos took Uranus's manhood from him. A lot of bits of rock, like sperm, fell from the sky.
There was that aspect to the story, but also that that Uranus threw a number of rocks that became sentient and to wage war against the Titans. It
turned into giants.
Yeah, it was not successful, but different tellings of that particular story. But the bottom line is
same thing, throwing seeds that generate. Yeah, it's the same story.
Right.
Different aspect of it.
And when you read the origin story of Aphrodite, Venus, that she was created from that. The after, of being the castration of Uranus.
On the sea.
Yeah. Uranus being heaven or sky. And gosh, what's the word I'm thinking of? These rocks were called.
They became omphalos.
Batilia.
Yes, that's
Batilia in Greek, which is a word that derives from Beit El, which means temple of or house of small g God.
And the idea of a deity coming out of a rock, that also is the origin story for
Mithra.
Mithra,
yeah. Now, if it sounds weird to you to think that, now wait a minute, how could the Greeks get words from Hebrew? It is, over the last half century or so, it has now become widely accepted that the Greeks, the Mycenaean Greeks, were in contact with Canaan and the early Israelite world as far back as the time of Joseph, Jacob, 1600 BC, somewhere in there. We know that Joshua fought the Hivites in the vicinity of Mount Hermon. That would have been around 1406 BC. And the Hivites were, that Hebrew name derived from another language from Anatolia, the Luvian language for the Mycenaean Greeks. The Luvians called them the Ahiyawa, and in the Bible, they're the Hivites. So this connection between the Canaanite religion and the Hebrew language and Greek is sort of like a no-brainer. Zeus is Baal. That's what he is, who he is.
Well, yes, and the Etruscan story also links into that because Aeneas went to Carthage. His ship was driven to Carthage, according to Virgil, and there he fell in love with and had an affair with Dido, who was from
Tyre.
Phoenician.
Yeah, and this is how you know it's fiction, because Aeneas would have been at the end of the Bronze Age, around 1200 BC, and Tyre wasn't created until about 800 BC by the city of Tyre. Carthage was a colony of Tyre.
Yes, it was. Yeah. So the question is, because I've seen complaints about Virgil's timeline before.
Yeah.
And as more archaeology takes place, more often than not, Virgil is proven right.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see.
Well, absence of evidence does not, is not evidence of absence, as they say. Absence of, maybe we just haven't found it yet.
Yeah, that could be.
The point being that the arrival of Cybele, the Magna Mater, the Great Mother, in Rome from Asia Minor, probably suggests that the origin of Magna Mater and Cybele is further east, Mesopotamia. A lot of scholars still hold on to this mythical Proto-Indo-European pantheon, but because the Proto-Indo-Europeans didn't write anything down, or didn't have a language to write down, or didn't have a written language anyway, we
Not
don't
that
know.
we recognize
Yeah.
as a language.
So they're basically trying to reconstruct the names from an older language that has no written evidence. But since the 1940s, when they discovered the Song of Going Forth is what they call it now, which is the Kumarbi cycle. Kumarbi was the Hurrian name for Kronos and for Saturn. And when you look at the story and their origin story for the Hurrian deities, it's just an older version of the Greek story. Yes, there was a sky god and he mated with Mother Gaia and created these titans, but he kept them shut up inside her, and so she get the titans to rebel and castrate Uranus, and he flies off and leaves. And then but prophesies a coming that the children of the titans of Kronos and Rhea would overthrow Kronos, and so he swallows them as they're born to prevent them. Same story in the older Hurrian. And the Hurrians come from the Ararat Plain. We can trace them back through their pottery. So all of this goes back to Mesopotamia at the end of the day.
So we're getting back to the Pope, just to circle back.
And the Vatican placed on this mountain there with the...
Well, exactly. And spiritually speaking, in history, the Pope essentially raised up kings, which is what the Lord does.
Yes.
The Pope is supposed to represent the Lord on earth. I don't buy into that.
Vicar of
Many of you
Christ.
don't either.
Yeah.
Exactly. Bishop of Rome, so to speak. But the so-called Vicar of Christ has been the man who makes the decision as to whether or not a king or queen gets to maintain that throne. You have to have my stamp of approval. Otherwise, I will do what I say. Otherwise, I will excommunicate you, and you will become a failed monarch. And every other country that I control is now told you have to make war and remove that person from the throne forcibly.
Yeah. And that's even beyond the spiritual guidance the Vatican and the Pope provides for 1.4 billion Catholics. It is a nation with its own property, its own intelligence services.
Wall, too.
Yeah, and a wall. Interesting. So this is a major geopolitical, but with theopolitical, as with all nations. This is what, when Satan was testing Jesus, he said, look at all these nations. I'll give them all to you if you just bend the knee to me. They are mine. I can give them to whoever I want. And Jesus doesn't say, no, you're a liar. That's not true. He basically condemns him for trying to test God.
And by the way, many of you probably have already read Petrus Romanus. If you have not, we highly recommend you do. I think you can still get it through the Skywatch TV store, probably still through Amazon, but you could probably find used copies at the very least through Amazon. It was one of the late Tom Horn's greatest books, and I think very insightful. It was based on the Saint Malachi's prophecy of the popes. And the final pope was to be called Peter the Roman in his prophecy of the popes. So Peter the Roman is probably not Francis. But if that's true, then it means there's one more pope to come.
Yeah.
Peter the Roman, who would that be?
Well, that's a really good question. By the way, I'm looking at the Skywatch TV store, and I will link to this in the I will link to this in the show notes.
Yeah, if they're out of it, they may want to order some more.
Well, no, you can still get the Final Roman Emperor Ultimate Collection, which is not just Petrus Romanus; it's also the Final Roman Emperor, and it also includes a couple of DVDs.
Oh, good.
The store also offers a DVD produced by WorldNet Daily featuring Tom, titled "The Last Pope."
Oh, good.
Question mark.
Good.
The Last Pope. and another DVD, The Secret Vatican and Alien Antichrist Connection DVD. So if you're interested, very timely, I will put a link to the search results that will bring up all of that for you from Skywatch TV.
Not coincidentally, film based on a book by Robert Harris, I think, called
that's right.
Conclave,
Mm-hmm.
with Ralph Fiennes in the lead role. Great cast.
Yeah.
That movie just came out last year. You and I haven't watched it yet, but we intend to. I am now reading the book.
Yeah.
And it's all about the sudden death of a pope who was older. They're generally older.
Right.
So it's unusual for you to get a young man, but what if this is a very charismatic young man? There are many prophecy scholars for decades, probably the last 100 years, who have looked at the Pope as a good candidate, at least for the false prophet, if not for the actual Antichrist. But the idea that historically, for the last many, probably 800 years or more, the Pope has been the one to declare who gets to be the sovereign of a nation.
Right.
I think that still exists to a certain degree, but it is much more subtle.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of diplomacy that takes place out of the Vatican. The Vatican is not there just for
show
for religious instruction.
Right.
Shall we say it is there as a political entity, and like the old joke goes, what do you get? What do you get when you mix politics and religion? You get politics, and that is very true. This is why, by the way, as Christians, we don't think the government should be involved in setting any kind of religious policy. We talked about a few episodes back about President Trump and creating the White House Faith Office. Just set aside the person he selected to be in charge. I just don't think the White House should be involved in faith generically, other than to keep the government out of religion altogether. I mean, that's what the First Amendment to the Constitution says. Congress make no law establishing or regarding the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, there are groups that try to take advantage of that, like the Satanic Temple, which has filed lawsuits claiming that to them abortion is a sacrament, and so they should be allowed to practice it regardless of what state law says. All right, they're trying to abuse the system.
Well, they are. And what's the next step? Murder is a sacrament?
Well, there are some who might claim that. There are certainly those who have claimed that illegal drug use is part of their religion. It's like, all right, so you may be it may be impossible for a Christian nation to completely stay out of it and say, okay, look, we have determined that in order to have the kind of society we want, we're going to need to say, you're not a real religion or whatever. But again, that's the enemy trying to use politics to influence the theopolitics behind the scenes. And that's what the Vatican has been doing for centuries. But Islam is doing the same thing. It's just Islam is more overt. It's like convert or die. I mean, that's basically the choice you get. Either you swear allegiance, loyalty to Muhammad and his teachings, or, say goodbye to your head. There's a 1400-year history of that on planet Earth. And again, behind the scenes, I think the enemy is pushing this conflict, not just between Islam and the West, but between NATO and Russia and China and the West. It may be that these wars, which make no sense on their face, you can understand why China would want Taiwan back. I hope they don't get Taiwan back. The Taiwanese, I'm sure, would prefer to live under their own government. But war between Russia and Europe makes no logical sense. Anyone who's just looking at the numbers there in terms of how many artillery shells can each side produce out in their factories in a given month. Russia, hands down, Russia has maintained its industrial production capacity, and it's got the natural resource. Like 24% of the world's natural gas is in Russia. They can build power plants all day long fired by natural gas and have all the electricity they want. Europe, well, they had access to that for a while through Nord Stream 1 until somebody blew up that pipeline.
I think the bottom line is what's going on in Europe and also what's going on in parts of the South China Sea and in the Middle East. It appears that we're headed towards World War III.
It does, and that may be setting up the rise of, someone who comes along and says, I'll fix everything. And the world in desperation turns to him and says, yes, and if you do, we'll worship you as God. And maybe multiple religions who are willing to make that claim if he saves us from what appears to be certain annihilation. Well, the drive to create an artificial superintelligence.
Yeah,
which likewise makes no sense.
Which you and I are going to actually be addressing when we get down to the Ready Now Expo in Blue Eye, Missouri next month, April 11th.
Just a month away, yeah.
Yeah, it's coming up. But I lost my train of thought. What was I going with?
Artificial intelligence, existential threat.
It was before that.
Pushing us to World War III.
Yes, and I'll think of it in a minute. If I didn't, sometimes if I don't say it when it's in my head, I will lose it entirely. And that is sometimes why I just suddenly speak up and I try to raise my hand. You guys don't see it, but I try to raise my hand so Derek knows that I have to say something, because if I don't, I'll lose it, but it'll come back to me in a minute. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Middle East, we should probably talk about the situation in Syria too, and how that is leading towards what appears to be more imminent conflict. We talked about the redrawing of the Middle East map last week, and also on an upcoming episode of Unraveling Revelation, as Avi Lipkin has been looking at the situation there with the Druze in the south, a second Druze community this week. That makes two now in the south, in that Suwaida area, which is around Jebel al-Druze, the mountain of the Druze, which was an independent country for about 10 years, back 100 years ago after World War I. The Druze had their own country until it was then eventually rolled into Syria.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned World War I, and that isn't what I was going to talk about a minute ago, but I do highly recommend to people, if you love history and you want to have an idea of what's going to be happening, take a look at World War I and what led up to it and what triggered it.
Yeah.
Well, officially, what triggered it. But the area that it happened in, I think you're going to find that we are repeating that mistake, those series of mistakes.
Yeah. The interlocking treaties, NATO and
exactly.
the agreement that Sir Keir Starmer signed with Zelensky last week, but we want the United States to backstop the conflict. Like, okay, so what you're saying is we're signing a treaty, but we're going to obligate the United States to come in and save your bacon? The British boots on the ground and
assuming you can keep the bacon.
Yeah.
The Muslims in the UK are now insisting
yeah.
that bacon be banned.
Yeah, and that, you can't eat anything. It's Ramadan. You cannot, how dare you eat in front of me during Ramadan?
I shared that story about the bacon, and my response was to have a whole bunch of bacon emojis.
Yeah. Anyway, Syria is now, despite the rebranding that HTS, that's the group that pushed Assad out of Damascus back in December and has taken over the country, ostensibly, the world is recognizing HTS as the government of Syria, but then you've got the Alawites in the enclave along the Mediterranean coast, the Druze in the south, the Druze along the Golan Heights, and the Kurds east of the Euphrates River do not recognize the government in Damascus as its government.
And so the lines are going to be redrawn.
Right.
Some of those people groups may get their own little conclave, their own little country.
But not without a fight, apparently.
Not without a fight, exactly.
As has just been reported within the last 24 hours, HTS and elements of HTS have gone into Druze and Christian communities in the western part of Syria and started hauling people out and torturing them and killing them. And this is kind of what people expected. This is why they didn't want this violent Sunni group that had been kind of bottled up in the northwest of the country to come in and take over the whole place. But again, they don't control all of Syria. Syria is an artificial construct. It has been for 100 years. The Kurds in the northeast, want their own country. Interestingly, the group in Turkey, the PKK, which is designated a terrorist group by the Turks, the U.S. government, the founder of it, and I was right the other day, by the way, when I was trying to remember his name. It is Abdullah Öcalan, who's been in prison since 1990.
Mm-hmm.
He founded the group as a separatist movement. They've been fighting a low-grade civil war with the Turks for, 40,000 people have died in this conflict. They've carried out some very high-profile terrorist attacks. He's now issued a public letter calling on his followers to lay down their arms and disband, dissolve the group.
That's big.
It is big. But the Kurds, their territory straddles Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Turkey, and there are like 40 million of them. And they are the majority ethnic group in these areas. They've got autonomy in Iraq, but not in Syria officially anyway, even though they control everything east of the Euphrates River. So if Israel does what Netanyahu said he was going to do a couple of weeks ago and fight to keep HTS out of the territory south of Damascus to protect the Druze, which a lot of the Druze seem to be in favor of, then you might have an autonomous Druze-Israeli zone in the south extending all the way to the Euphrates, the Kurds east of the Euphrates, connecting to the autonomous Kurdish zone in Iraq, connected to Kurdish zones in Iran and Turkey. That's a huge change in the geopolitics of the region. But again, HTS
geopolitics
and the theopolitics, the Kurds, or rather HTS backed by the Turks, appear to be ready to fight to take over all of that territory.
They just suddenly appeared.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that they hadn't been organizing in the background, but it's suddenly is as if somebody just lit a fire underneath them.
Right.
I'll back you.
Yeah, and Assad found that his forces just, fled
the interview
in a hurry. Now, there have been reports this past week, interestingly, that Netanyahu is trying to convince Trump to convince Putin to keep the Russian bases in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Russians rather, have a military base at Latakia and an air base whose name I can't pronounce because it's got way too many consonants. Kamimniamniamniam.
I don't know.
It's something like that. It's got a K and an H and a lot of M's.
It's like that what may have been an artificial vessel of some kind crossing in front of the sun. Remember that one?
Yes. Or it's like the occasional messages I will get from little 7-year-old Oliver when he gets a hold of his dad's phone.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah.
I so love those.
It's like, it's all consonants.
I do remember what I wanted to talk about,
excellent.
and I think it's a good way to close out. I don't know how we're doing on time, but
perfect timing.
The late Dr. Tom Horn, as well as many of us in Skywatch TV / GHTV, Gilbert House TV, we being a sister ministry to Skywatch, Donna Howell also believe that at the same time that the world is going into World War III, and spiritually speaking, it's as if the entire fallen realm have just started to have a major party, or worse, a major war amongst themselves. That all of their activities will affect us. And the Lord, we have to remember, is allowing this, but we believe that there may well be a great awakening at the same time or just before this. In the Middle East, in the Midwest, here in the United States, in Indiana and Ohio, college campuses are starting to have massive great awakenings. Purdue University had a big sort of almost a camp meeting, a tent meeting, revival of sorts. And half of the kids who were there, and I think it was like 10,000 kids who were there, half of them went forward and gave their lives to Christ.
Wow.
There was I think it was an RV that had a place for baptisms in it, that these kids went right in and got baptized.
Wow.
And that had happened previously in Ohio. This is led by, and I can't remember if the coach is from Ohio or from another school, but he and his wife started preaching to their team and then to the rest of the college, and now it's going to other campuses.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I think, an indicator of what may break out, not just on college campuses, but in many areas. And I think as a body of Christ, as the body of Christ, it is incumbent upon us to pray for young people, to pray for pastors, to pray for anybody who is in the great, has a great opportunity to share the gospel, and we ourselves at least pray. We need to pray for a great awakening. We need
Yeah.
to pray that there may be an outbreak of a great prayer session that leads to an igniting of the Holy Spirit across our country, across the world. The Holy Spirit is here amongst us, the body of Christ.
Yes,
And we've fallen down on our jobs.
we have. We get too caught up in the things that are right in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
The geopolitics.
The things of this world.
Right, and not looking at the spiritual nature of our reality and where we need to be focusing our efforts. It's just, it's too easy, especially with social media. It's just really easy, speaking to myself here, to get caught up in the back and forth. Hey, Jesus is an alien. No, he's not. What are you talking about? Just, okay, pray for that person, shake dust from the sandals, move on.
If you can have an actual conversation.
Yeah, and to do it lovingly
then
instead
that
of...
is a good way to witness.
Right.
Our good friend Zev Porat spent 4 years arguing back and forth with a guy that slowly led him to Christ.
Yeah.
He had, as a Jew, he'd just become an atheist.
Right.
And he was eventually led to Christ. So you can engage in a way that is profitable, but man, much of that stuff is not profitable.
Yeah. And by profitable, we're not talking about money here. We're talking about,
for the kingdom.
For the kingdom, right. Yeah. And again, because my nature is to want to engage in a battle of logic, a battle of wits, a battle of, argument. And that is often not profitable because people often don't like to hear that what they think or what they believe is wrong, because what they're actually hearing, even though that's not what you intend, is, well, he thinks I'm stupid. And that's not a way to, win friends or influence people.
Well, our job hasn't changed. We are to lift up
yeah.
Christ, crucified, risen, and coming again.
Make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And when you read 1 Peter 3, you realize, hey, wait a minute, he's connecting baptism to Jesus going down and declaring victory over the spirits in prison.
I know it.
Those who were imprisoned in the days of Noah, the watchers who rebelled, the sons of God from Genesis 6. Hey,
we live in very interesting times.
We do.
Isn't it wonderful that the Lord allowed us to live right now when many of us think that not just 2025 is prophetic, but the next 10 years or so, we're going to see the entire world change.
Yeah. Yes. Look up. Redemption draws near. Yeah. Well, again, we've got our calendar at our website and on our app. We'll just touch on the next event on the calendar because it's just a month away. And you want to get your name in quick because they do need reservations if you plan to attend this event. It is free to attend. But because of fire code regulations, you got to have a limit on the number of seats, people sitting in the seats.
And when you go to readynowexpo.com, I think.
Yep.
At least on the mobile app, and it's the mobile version, the little horizontal lines where you pull down the menu. If you go there, you'll see lodging. So if you don't live in the area itself where you can go home every night, they have a few places, I think, where you can actually pay to stay on the campus. So check that lodging link, and there's a phone number where you can call.
Okay, I'm looking at the website. I don't see it at the website, but on the mobile app.
On the mobile app, I found it this morning.
Okay, well, that is really helpful and interesting.
You would think it would be somewhere on that mobile site, though. That's kind of odd.
Yeah, the desktop version is what I'm looking at here. Anyway, the Ready Now Expo is Thursday, April 10th, beginning at 9 a.m., and it runs through 7 p.m. on Saturday, April 12th.
It's under on-site amenities.
Oh, okay. All right.
You go to
So-
on-site amenities, and you will see amenities. Sounds like a Greek man.
It does, yes.
You'll see something in
Euripides.
there earlier.
Mahmoud.
Thought I saw lodging. Yeah, lodging is under there.
Okay.
Lodging, on-site lodging options, RV park at Morningside, but also there are places to stay on.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
looking on the desktop when you go to the details side, the tab, and the register tab on the
Yeah.
right-hand side. Anyway, so registering is free if you're going to attend. It's at Morningside Church in Blue Island,
Yeah, the
Missouri.
lodging is not.
Lodging is not, but the actual conference itself is free, but because there's a limit on the number of seats available, you do want to register in advance. If you cannot attend, this will be streamed online, and it's just $25. Speakers include L.A. Marzulli, Pastor Carl Gallups, Alan DiDio, Joe Artis Horn, Vicki Joy Anderson, Dave Robbins, who is the successor to Irvin Baxter,
Oh, yeah.
and the two of us, we will be speaking as well. So again, this is coming up in just a month, April 10th through 12th. It'll be all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, 3 full days. And if you're in the area, come and join us.
I
No
hope
charge.
Ricky Baker preaches.
Oh, yeah. He's listed as the host. Don't know if he's going to be speaking, but at very least, he will be there. And if you stay for church on Sunday morning, I suspect he will.
I hope he does. He is, but that young man is on fire.
Yes, he is. So that and all of our events coming up, including our tour of Israel in October, and all of that at our website, gilberthouse.org, or at the Gilbert House app.
And I suspect it's time to open up the crate and let the girls go out and play.
Yes, indeed. And so tomorrow morning, Gilbert House Fellowship, our weekly Bible study, and I think there will be a view from the bunker tomorrow night. We'll see if I can get one knocked out this afternoon. I'm going to talk about the occult origins of ancient aliens.
Oh, good
Yeah.
stuff.
I've done that before, but I think it's worth repeating because that's a trend, a meme that's going around on social media again. It's like, no, I'm sorry, Jesus is not coming back for us in a spaceship. And we'll explain where that idea comes from, because it comes right out of the occult of the 19th century.
It
So
does.
until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and for grace and glory. Bye-bye, everybody.
PID Radio is produced by Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, Twitter @PID Radio, or the PID Radio page at Facebook. Join us each week for our online Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, online at gilberthouse.org.